Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come? Is that not so? Are you about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us? Is that so, Spirit? Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any specter that I've seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear you company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me? Lead on, lead on. The night is fading fast, and it's precious time to me, I know. Lead on, Spirit.
The phantom moved away as it had come towards him. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress. They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up and surround them. But there they were, in the heart of it, among the merchants who hurried up and down and clinked the money in their pockets and conversed in groups and looked at their watches and trifled thoughtfully with their great gold seals, as Scrooge had seen them often do. The Spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Seeing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk.
I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
Why, what was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die.
God only knows. What has he done with his money?
I haven't heard. Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me. That's all I know. It's likely to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my life I don't know of anyone or anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer. I don't mind going if a lunch is provided, but I must be fed if I'm to go.
Well, I'm the most disinterested among you, after all, for I never wear black gloves, and I never eat lunch. But I'll offer to go, if anybody else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met.
The phantom glided on into a street. Its finger pointed to two persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking that the explanation might lie here.
How are you?
Well, how are you?
Well, old Scratch has got his own at last, hey?
So I am told. Cold, isn't it?
Seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose?
No. Something else to think of. Good morning to you.
They left the busy scene and went into an obscure part of the town, where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, alleys and archways like so many cesspools disgorged their offenses of smell and dirt and life upon the straggling streets. Far in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed used goods shop. Sitting in among the wares he dealt in was a gray-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, who had screened himself from the outside cold air by a scruffy curtain of miscellaneous tatters hung upon a line, and the man smoked his pipe in all the luxury of calm retirement. Scrooge and the phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. But she had scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too.
Let the charwoman alone to be the first, let Mrs. Dilbert the laundress alone to be the second, and let the undertaker's man alone to be the third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance. If we haven't all three met here without it,
You wouldn't have met in a better place. Yeah, come into the parlor. Oh, stop. Until I shut the door of the shop. It ain't such a bit of rusty metal in the place as its own hinges. I believe and I'm sure no such old bones here except mine. There's all suitable for our own calling. We're well matched. Come into my parlor.
what odds then? What odds? Mrs. Dilber, we both came upon the old man rascal. What odds, I say? But every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did.
That's true indeed. No man more so.
Why then, don't just stand there staring as if you were afraid, woman. Who's the wiser that we picked the pocket of the dead? We're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose.
We should not hope, Miss Dilber.
No, indeed.
Very well then, that's enough. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose.
No, indeed.
If he wanted to keep them after he was dead, that wicked old screw, why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have somebody to look after him when he was struck with the death, instead of laying gasping out alone by himself. Ain't that so, Mrs. Dilber?
It's the truest word that were ever spoke. It's a judgment on him. What say you, charwoman?
I wish it was a little heavier judgment, and it should have been, you may depend upon it, if I could have laid my hands on anything else. Open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor afraid for them to see it. We know pretty well that we was helping ourselves before we met here, I believe. It's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe.
That's your account, then. I wouldn't give another sixpence if I was to be boiled for not doing it. Who's next? Miss Dilber. I see. Well then, let's have it. Sheets, towels, apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver spoons, a pair of sugar thongs, and a few boots. Capital! I always give too much to the ladies. It's the weakness of mine, and that's the way I ruin myself. That's your account. If I asked me for another penny, I'd make an open question. I repent of being so liberal and knock off a half a crown.
And now undo my bundle, Joe.
What do you call these? Bed curtains?
Bed curtains.
You don't mean to say you took them down, the rings and all, with him lying there?
Yes, I do. Why not?
You were born to make your fortune, and you'll certainly do it.
I certainly shan't hold back my hand when I can get anything in it by just reaching for it, for the sake of such a man as he was. I promise you, Joe. Hey, watch you don't drop that oil upon them blankets now.
His blankets?
Whose else's do you think? He isn't likely to take cold without them, I dare say.
I hope he didn't die of anything catching,
Don't you be afraid of that. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such things, if he did. You may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it, not a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me.
What do you call wasting of it?
Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it isn't good enough for anything. He can't look uglier now than he did in it.
Here it is, then. What, oh, yes.
This is the end of it, you see. Of him, that's for sure. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he's dead.
Spirit, I see the case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way. Merciful heaven, what is this?
The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy. But a pale light rising in the outer air fell straight upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man.
Oh, Spirit, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me, let us go. I understand you, and I would do it if I could, but I have not the power, Spirit. I have not the power to remove the deathly veil. If there is any person in the town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, show that person to me, Spirit, I beseech you.
The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment, like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealed a room by daylight where a mother and her children were. She was expecting someone, and with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, started at every sound, looked out from the window, glanced at the clock, tried in vain to work with her needle, and could hardly bear the voices of the children in their play. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed, though he was young.
Is it good, husband, or bad?
Bad, Caroline.
We are quite ruined then.
No, there is hope yet, Caroline.
If he relents, there is. Nothing is past hope if such a miracle would happen.
He is past relenting. He is dead. What the half-drunken woman whom I told you of last night said to me when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, and what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying then.
Well, to whom will our debt be transferred?
I don't know, but before that time we shall be ready with the money. And even though we're not, it would be a bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor in his successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline.
Let me see more tenderness connected with that death, or that dark chamber, Spirit, which we left just now will be forever present to me.
The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and the children seated round the fire. Quiet, very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but surely they were very quiet.
And he took a child and set him in the midst of them.
I'm done with my sewing. The color hurts my eyes. It makes them weak by candlelight. And I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. It must be near his time, Peter.
Past it, rather. But I think he's walked a little slower than he used to these last few evenings, Mother.
I've known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulders very fast indeed.
And so have I, often.
But he was very little to carry, and his father loved him so. That is no trouble, no trouble. Oh, and there's your father now. Sunday? You went today then, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green the place is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little child, Tiny Tim, my little child. I met Mr. Scrooge's nephew on the street. What a kind man he is. What kindness he showed to me, though I have scarcely seen him in all these years. But he seeing me as I looked, just a little down, you know, he inquired what had happened to distress me. On which, for he is the pleasantest spoken gentleman you ever heard, I told him, "I'm heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit," he said, "and heartily sorry for your good wife," he said to me, with such kindness. By the by, how he ever knew that, I don't know.
Knew what, my dear?
Why, that you were a good wife. Everybody knows that.
Very well observed, my boy. I hope they do. Heartily sorry, he told me, for your good wife. If I can be of service to you in any way, he said, giving me his card, that's where I live. Pray come to me. Now, it wasn't for the sake of anything he might be able to do for us, so much as for his kind way, that this was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us.
I'm sure he's a good soul.
You would be sure of it, my dear, if you saw and spoke to him. I shouldn't be at all surprised, mark what I say, if he got Peter a better situation.
And then Peter will be keeping company with someone and setting up for himself. Get along with you.
It's just as likely as not one of these days, though there's plenty of time for that, Peter. But however and whenever we part from one another, I am sure we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting that there was among us.
Never, Father.
And I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was a little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it.
Phantom, something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me, who was that man that was lying dead?
The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him as before, but there seemed no order in these visions, except that they were in the future, into the resorts of businessmen.
Spirit, please stop for a moment. I know these courtyards. It's where I dwell. I see my house. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come. Oh, my house is yonder. Oh, why do you point away?
Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. Scrooge followed the phantom until they reached an iron gate. Scrooge paused to look round before entering.
Oh, Spirit, it is here that wretched man whose veiled body I had seen lay underneath the ground. Am I to learn his name now? Oh, before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they shadows of the things that may be only?
The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards the tomb, trembling as he went. And following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge.
I am that man who laid upon the bed. Oh, Spirit! Oh, no, no! Spirit, hear me! I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been, but for this communication. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Good Spirit, I fall to your feet. Does your nature mediate for me? Does it pity me? Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by unaltered life. Oh, Spirit, I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all in the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on the stone.
The spirit having repulsed him, it shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in.